Let me ask you a question that might sting a little. How many great leaders do you actually remember for their quiet wisdom, and how many for their loud presence? In a world craving certainty, we often mistake noise for knowledge, arrogance for ability, and image for integrity. We live in an age where confidence, no matter how misplaced, wins the room before competence has a chance to speak. And so, again and again, we watch the throne go not to the wise, the honest, or the kind, but to the narcissists, the liars, and the fools. This isn't just a political problem, it's a psychological one, it's cultural, it's systemic, and most of all, it's deeply human. At the core of this strange phenomenon is a psychological quirk baked into our survival instinct. When people project certainty, our brains feel safe, even if that certainty is rooted in fiction. The liar who says I alone can fix it sounds stronger to a frightened crowd than the truth teller who says it's complicated and we need each other. The narcissist who boldly claims greatness, even without evidence, seems more reassuring than the humble leader who admits doubt. In chaos, confidence is a drug, and society, addicted. Leadership structures, especially in corporations and governments, are built like stages. Those stages reward performance, and what are narcissists if not master performers? They curate every word, gesture, and narrative to maintain the illusion of competence. They understand the power of appearance, and they've mastered the art of playing to the crowd. Meanwhile, those who are reflective, cautious, or self-critical often seem indecisive in comparison, even when their insights are far more accurate. The liar, they know that truth is slow but lies sprint. They manipulate attention, understanding that most people won't dig deep enough to find the roots. They aren't burdened by conscience or complexity. They thrive in simplicity and slogans, and in our impatient world, that kind of clarity, no matter how false, is magnetic. And then there are the fools, the ones who rise not because of intelligence or integrity, but because of their willingness to say what others fear to act recklessly under the guise of courage. They are cheered for their authenticity, while others quietly clean up the wreckage they leave behind. They are mistaken for bold leaders when in truth they are simply unfiltered and unaware. So how do we shift this tide? We must first recognize the painful truth. Systems don't just fail us, they mirror us. The reason narcissists, liars, and fools are rewarded is because at some level we keep choosing them. We reward charisma without asking where it leads. We punish doubt, even though doubt is the birthplace of wisdom. We elevate spectacle over substance, but this can change, must change, if we begin valuing something deeper. Imagine leadership that is not built on dominance but on listening, not on declarations but on discernment, not on ego but on empathy. Imagine a world where leaders are chosen not for how loudly they speak, but for how deeply they think. That begins with us. We must become better followers, not in the blind sense, but in the discerning sense. We must learn to resist the temptation of easy answers and strongman illusions. We must stop mistaking manipulation for magnetism. Real leadership is not about having the most power, it's about using power to serve others. That kind of leadership does not crave the spotlight. It doesn't deceive to gain ground. It doesn't posture or pretend. It humbles itself enough to grow. This also means reimagining what strength looks like. Real strength is not arrogance. It's the ability to be accountable. Real strength is not domination. It's the courage to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to change direction when necessary. We must create cultures that reward these traits, not punish them. And let us not forget, education is resistance. We must teach emotional intelligence with the same intensity that we teach economics. We must train future leaders in self-awareness, not just strategy. Because the battlefield of leadership isn't just out there in the world, it's also in here, in the mind. And the leaders who don't know themselves will always fall prey to their worst instincts, or worse, ours. What you reward is what you repeat. So let us reward thoughtfulness, reward collaboration, reward integrity even when it's not glamorous. Let us build systems that resist manipulation and platforms that don't just amplify the loudest voices, but the wisest ones. The journey will be slow, it will be uphill, but every time we choose humility over hubris, truth over theatrics, service over self-interest, we are rewriting the script, and that's how the future begins. Now imagine this future, not as a fantasy but as a mission, one where we no longer ask who looks like a leader, but instead ask who acts like one. A future where the courageous aren't just bold, but also kind. Where we no longer hand the microphone to the charming deceiver, but to the quiet builder. Where leadership is earned, not performed. Leadership often confuses charisma with competence, a dangerous misjudgment that has shaped the modern world in profound ways. This confusion arises because humans are psychologically wired to respond positively to confidence, especially under pressure. When someone enters a room with a commanding voice, a straight posture, and unwavering certainty in their tone, our brains often interpret these signals as indicators of capability. In survival terms, it makes sense. During times of crisis or uncertainty, the person who appears most sure of themselves can feel like a lifeline. Unfortunately, charisma is not evidence of wisdom, and certainty is not proof of truth. This subtle yet powerful bias toward style over substance has led to the rise of countless leaders who look and sound the part, but who lack the depth, integrity, or intelligence to truly lead. Charisma is performance-based. It is rehearsed, projected, and honed to capture attention and admiration. Competence, on the other hand, is quiet. It is built on experience, learning, trial and error, and often carries with it a deep sense of humility. A truly competent leader is aware of what they do not know. They pause before making sweeping declarations. They ask questions instead of pretending to have all the answers. Yet, in a society driven by immediacy, spectacle, and perception, these traits can be mistaken for weakness or indecisiveness. This dynamic becomes especially visible during elections, corporate promotions, or media-dominated leadership selections. The charismatic candidate, often equipped with polished speaking skills and a curated image, is far more likely to win hearts and headlines than the thoughtful strategist who spends more time solving problems than selling themselves. Psychological research supports this tendency. The confidence heuristic is a well-documented phenomenon in which individuals assess the credibility of a message based not on its content, but on the confidence with which it is delivered. In group settings, people consistently defer to the most confident speaker, regardless of their actual expertise. This means that leadership selection processes, both formal and informal, are often skewed from the beginning. Organizations, boards, voters, and communities unconsciously equate visible confidence with ability, promoting those who speak loudest or look most leader-like, rather than those who actually possess the skills necessary to lead effectively. The professional world compounds this error through its structures of reward and recognition. Leadership programs often prioritize presentation skills over problem-solving abilities. Job interviews assess candidates in a compressed time frame where performance under pressure is mistaken for long-term potential. Public leaders are evaluated not by the quality of their decisions, but by their ability to communicate confidence to shareholders, constituents, or followers. In these environments, competent individuals who are introverted, cautious, or deeply analytical often struggle to compete with charismatic counterparts who may lack substance but thrive on optics. This issue is further amplified by media and digital platforms. Leaders today must be as much performers as they are policymakers. Social media rewards bold statements, viral moments, and curated personas. In such a climate, nuanced thought doesn't trend, confidence does. And so, those who master the mechanics of attention often rise faster than those who master the complexities of leadership. What gets seen gets celebrated, and what gets celebrated gets repeated. Over time, this dynamic erodes the distinction between genuine leadership and performative leadership, breeding environments where looking competent becomes more valuable than being competent. Competent leaders often struggle to rise because they are more aware of the stakes. They think critically, speak cautiously, and are less inclined to make promises they cannot keep. Their humility can be their undoing in a system that rewards bravado. Their careful analysis is often drowned out by the louder voices around them. Many of these leaders work behind the scenes, propping up systems that others take credit for. They carry the weight of responsibility without seeking the spotlight. But in a culture that elevates personality over process, they are frequently overlooked, sidelined, or dismissed as lacking the presence required for leadership. The cost of this confusion is enormous. When charisma is rewarded over competence, decisions are made based on optics rather than outcomes. Teams are led by individuals who may not understand the systems they are managing. Nations are steered by those who prefer applause to accountability. In the long run, this leads to dysfunction, disillusionment, and often disaster. Competence is not always attractive. It is not always smooth. It does not always shine. But it is what keeps systems working, people protected, and visions realized. The more we conflate charisma with competence, the further we drift from the leadership we actually need. Systems of power are vulnerable to manipulation, making them ideal playgrounds for narcissists and liars who understand how to control perception. These individuals do not rely on genuine merit, experience, or ethical values to climb the ranks. Instead, they exploit the very structures designed to promote fairness and effectiveness by mastering the art of perception. From political institutions to corporate hierarchies, from religious organizations to entertainment empires, power systems are built on mechanisms that can be bent, bypassed, or broken by those willing to trade authenticity for advantage. At the heart of this vulnerability lies a dangerous assumption that those who rise within a system must have done so by earning it. In reality, systems are human, made, and like all human constructs, they carry biases, loopholes, and blind spots. Narcissists are particularly skilled at identifying these flaws. They understand how to flatter those above them, manipulate those beside them, and intimidate those below. They recognize that image often trumps substance, and that telling people what they want to hear is more efficient than telling them the truth. In this way, they convert power into a performance, a game of strategic deception where the goal is not to serve, but to survive and dominate. Thrive where accountability is weak and transparency is optional. Systems that fail to consistently verify truth, reward integrity, or penalize dishonesty create fertile ground for manipulation. A lie, if told confidently and often enough, can become embedded in the system itself, shaping policy, culture, and public memory. These individuals are not always obvious villains. Often, they present themselves as visionary leaders, reformers, or protectors. But underneath the facade is a fundamental disregard for truth and an obsession with control. Their skill lies in crafting narratives that shift blame, rewrite history, and obscure their true intentions. They exploit the complexity of systems, knowing that most people won't dig deep enough to separate fact from fiction. Institutional structures often inadvertently aid these manipulators by prioritizing loyalty over truth, efficiency over ethics, and short-term results over long-term resilience. For example, in many corporate environments, success is measured by quarterly performance and public image. A narcissistic executive who delivers short-term profits, regardless of the long-term damage, is often praised and promoted. In politics, a charismatic liar who controls the media narrative is more likely to be re-elected than a humble truth teller who challenges the status quo. In religious or ideological systems, those who claim moral superiority, while hiding their abuses, can maintain power simply because the system lacks the will or mechanisms to hold them accountable. One of the key tactics manipulators use is the weaponization of loyalty. They create in-groups and out-groups, rewarding blind allegiance and punishing dissent. This erodes the checks and balances necessary for a healthy system. Voices of criticism are dismissed as disloyal or ungrateful. Whistleblowers are isolated. Honest opposition is framed as sabotage. Over time, the system becomes more about protecting the leader than serving the mission. The narcissist thrives in this environment, using flattery, fear, and false narratives to consolidate control. Their ability to reshape perception becomes more powerful than any formal title or authority. Another tactic is the exploitation of bureaucracy and complexity. The more complex a system, the easier it is to hide incompetence, corruption, or outright lies. Narcissists and liars understand that most people are overwhelmed by data, distracted by crisis, or disengaged from the details. They use this to bury bad decisions under layers of jargon, technicalities, or procedural fog. When challenged, they deflect, deny, or redirect, turning scrutiny into a personal attack. They master the art of plausible deniability, always staying just one step removed from the consequences of their actions. What makes this manipulation so dangerous is that it often goes unrecognized until significant damage has been done. By the time a system realizes it has been hijacked by the wrong kind of leader, trust has eroded, morale has collapsed, and the costs, financial, emotional, or human, are staggering. Institutions once built to uphold justice, innovation, or service are left hollow, their integrity sacrificed for the ambitions of a few. Even when exposed, narcissists and liars often survive by invoking a victim narrative, claiming they are being unfairly targeted by jealous peers or corrupt critics. They understand how to manipulate public sympathy, weaponize polarization, and turn accountability into persecution. This ability to reverse reality is perhaps their most powerful tool. By the time the system attempts to correct itself, the manipulators have already moved on, richer, more powerful, and ready to exploit the next system. Power does not corrupt in isolation. It attracts those already corrupted by their own egos and insecurities. And unless systems are designed with rigorous accountability, ethical reinforcement, and cultural self-awareness, they will continue to be exploited. The greatest weakness in any system is not its structure, but its assumption that character can be inferred from success. Narcissists and liars know better. They play the system not to improve it, but to use it as a ladder to serve themselves. True leadership requires humility, wisdom, and self-awareness, qualities that are often overshadowed by louder, flashier traits in the current cultural climate. These foundational elements are not always easily visible, nor are they aggressively self-promoting, which makes them easy to miss or undervalue in environments that reward spectacle over substance. Humility, wisdom, and self-awareness don't command the same immediate attention as confidence, charisma, or bold declarations, yet they are the cornerstones of sustainable, ethical, and transformational leadership. When they are absent, even the most promising initiatives can collapse under the weight of ego, impulsiveness, or blind ambition. Humility is the first and perhaps most misunderstood of these qualities. Contrary to popular belief, humility is not weakness or submissiveness. It is the quiet strength of someone who knows their limits and is willing to learn from others. A humble leader is not threatened by dissent or differing views. They welcome them because they understand that collective insight is more powerful than individual certainty. They do not need to be the smartest person in the room. Instead, they strive to create a room where smart, honest dialogue can flourish. Humility allows a leader to admit mistakes without defensiveness and to change course without shame. In doing so, they earn the trust of those they lead, not through dominance, but through credibility and consistency. Wisdom, as distinct from intelligence or technical skill, is the capacity to see beyond the immediate. It involves understanding the broader impact of decisions, recognizing patterns, and drawing from experience rather than impulse. A wise leader is measured in their responses and intentional in their actions. They do not chase short-term applause or fall prey to reactive decision-making. Instead, they think systemically and act with a sense of stewardship. Wisdom requires patience, something often incompatible with the high-speed, high-pressure environments of modern leadership. But it is this very patience that prevents rash policies, broken relationships, or ethical compromises. A leader without wisdom may succeed in the short run, but they often leave behind damage that takes years to repair. Self-awareness binds humility and wisdom together. It is the ability to observe oneself honestly, thoughts, emotions, motives, biases, and to act with clarity rather than ego. Leaders who are self-aware know how they affect others, how their own fears or desires shape their decisions, and when they are operating out of insecurity rather than insight. This kind of introspection is rare, not because it is unattainable, but because it is uncomfortable. It requires vulnerability, the willingness to confront one's blind spots, and the maturity to seek feedback without defensiveness. Self-aware leaders are not reactive, they are responsive. They are less likely to be manipulated by praise or criticism because they are anchored internally rather than externally. This makes them far more stable, especially in times of crisis. Yet these qualities are often invisible in traditional leadership selection processes. They don't sparkle on a resume, they don't come through in a high-energy pitch or a viral soundbite. They're hard to quantify and easy to overlook. As a result, leadership pipelines often prioritize superficial markers, degrees, titles, public speaking ability, and personal branding, over the internal depth that true leadership requires. A leader can be polished, articulate, and confident, yet still lack the ethical core or emotional maturity to handle power responsibly. Meanwhile, someone who leads with quiet conviction, deep reflection, and moral clarity may be passed over simply because they don't fit the mold of what a strong leader is supposed to look like. This distortion is compounded by a culture that equates leadership with control, dominance, and certainty. We often admire those who act without hesitation, who assert their opinions forcefully, and who never appear unsure of themselves. But true leadership is not about asserting dominance, it's about facilitating growth. It's about making decisions that serve others, not the self, and that requires an inner discipline that the world rarely celebrates. Humble, wise, and self-aware leaders may not command headlines, but they build institutions that last, teams that thrive, and cultures that evolve. Leadership, at its best, is not a performance. It is a practice, a continuous effort to serve with integrity, to listen more than speak, to seek truth over convenience. Such leadership may move more slowly, may be less glamorous, and may not appeal to the masses at first glance. But it endures, it uplifts, it transforms, and in times of real crisis, when the lights and cameras fade, it is the only kind of leadership that can truly hold.